One or two of my Tuesday group said that they'd seen it. Anyway, any news from you, Richard?
No, nothing. Nothing for
Okay.
me. Nothing exciting.
Nothing to do with lion taming or anything.
Uh,
My piece in the Barron District that made it 5 paragraphs about something that nobody knew anything about, so that worked quite well.
yeah, I did see it.
Yeah, it seemed to me because it was showing the trees a line down the hill in 1878, and it felt to me as if the trees are in alignment, associated with the pavement that would have been laid. And obviously, I'm putting that in with the walling, which would have had to have been placed on either side to stop any subsidence, meaning that you needed a handrail. And then people going up the hill would have needed the handrail to get to the Romney house at the back, which is on St. Nicholas Road. So that was my thinking behind it anyway. But I didn't put that in the piece. So right. So, Henry, anything from you, babe?
Just dinosaur footprints in Oxford.
You know what? Right. 1 minute there was no dinosaur footprints, and the ones in the Bendricks were the only ones in the whole wide world, and now they're absolutely everywhere.
Well, they were everywhere.
That's not my bloody point, and you know it's not my point. You know what I'm saying, don't you? It was like the ones at the Bendricks were like the only ones in Britain, and then suddenly everyone's got them. They're absolutely everywhere.
Yep, even down Barry.
Even in Barry, yeah, exactly. It's apparently somewhere in Lantwick Major as well now. Anyway, thanks for that.
There you go.
Thank you. Oh, good to have you on, Pat.
Yes,
We'll have a full group in a minute when everyone else turns up. Apparently, I was in another meeting, and these guys were waiting in one room, and I was in another room. Don't ask. Goth.
Yeah.
Go on.
Well,
Well, go on and say something. It can't all be about me.
I was going to, well, I haven't got anything archaeological, but Eleanor's doing the Silk Road at the moment. And last week she was in Samarkand.
Get off!
She sent me some fantastic pictures of the temple, not a temple, the palace of Tamerlane, their emperor. And I thought it might be interesting if I sent them to you. Maybe we could look at them sometime.
Yeah, guess what? We're doing China next week.
Oh, that's it then.
We are doing China next week.
That'll be handy.
Well, so actually, that would be really, really, really good. It's a bit like Henry having some photographs for us to look at, and then suddenly it's like, oh, we're doing it this week. Brilliant, excellent, we're loving it. So, oh, that would be absolutely brilliant. I really appreciate that, and you can tell her in advance. That's good.
Okay. Well, she hasn't come back yet.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. So, did I ask Pat? Pat?
No, you didn't. I did read about the dinosaur tracks. They were far. They went. I don't know if you mentioned it to anybody, and it's in a quarry. Where they're
In Oxford.
Yes, that's it. Yeah.
Not Cambridge, because Oxford are really competitive with Cambridge. It's a shame they didn't find them in Cambridge. Do you know what I mean? You remember the discussion we had, like, what was it last week? We've got somebody talking about human evolution going way back in China, and then said, oh, by the way, we got something in Tanzania. It's like a competition.
Yeah.
Great. So, right. Last night, kettle's just boiled. Last night we looked at a variety of things, but we looked at the Lydians, not the Lycians, but the Lydians. We looked at the box. We mentioned this new film. Well, not new film. It's the new cut, the Caligula film from 1979 that's just been released with all the sordid stuff, right? And we're doing the Achaemenid in Empire, which Achaemenid. I can't get set. I had the name there. Hang on, let's get the blooming name right. I just it would help if I could pronounce it right. The Achaemenid Empire. Nearly had it. So the Lycidian world and the Achaemenid world, and then that ties in with the Silk Route with Eleanor, with Gough, and then next week China. It sort of all comes together. And we mentioned next week about sort of evidence of these three people that were excavated in London a few years ago that have Chinese DNA. So they're obviously, how the hell did they get into Britain? But they're here. So that all comes together. And we're talking about the sort of the Silk Route stuff and sort of silk and stuff being found in Egypt. And well, we won't be doing that next week, but you know what I mean? It's all sort of linked. So the world gets incredibly small when you get this sort of everything linked together. They sort of say this today, don't they? That like we can fly to all these different parts of the world and we can link everything together. And you know, it's sort of everything's like so small now. You can press the sort of internet and you can get anywhere in the world. But the thing is, in many ways, that was like that back then. We do get a bit carried away with the sort of context in Cymru, Wales, where people say, "Oh, you know, I live in a village and I haven't gone I've not gone 5 miles away from the village." But then again, there's people probably still like that today who just don't want to go many places. So we judge the standard of the old of that in the old world, but in many ways, when we put in the Silk Route in China and Rome and Africa and all these different things together, and we talk about the evolution of humans and they're everywhere, and we're talking about the movement of horses and stuff, things get really incredibly small. So this in a way where we're sort of getting at. I want to share something with you which sounds obvious, but it's not, right? I did a little video today and I sat on the mound here in West Wales where we got my rare, well, endangered Borray sheep, and they're all happy, and my goat sat there sort of looking at me thinking, you know, I want something to eat. And I was looking at the landscape and I thought, oh, we want to do this video for a couple of days. It was a short video. And I just thought, I've been looking at this landscape for 5 years, right? And there's nothing in this landscape that is older than the middle 1700s, right? There's no buildings that predate the 1700s here. There's no headlines that predate. There's no ditches. There's no nothing, right? And I'm looking at this landscape and I'm thinking, this is incredibly sad because, you know, we're always taught because of the archaeology that so much is hidden under the surface and we find all these different things. But when you go to the countryside, places like Carnac in France, and you might trip over archaeology in Africa and so on. Our landscape in Britain is incredibly different from other archaeologies in different countries because there's a bit of our history that seems to have removed everything from lots of our landscapes, comparatively everything, right? So when you're sort of, when I was getting ready for my lectures, my sort of my live show in Ystrad Gunlice, I was traveling across the landscape all over the place to deliver leaflets and stuff. And I remember thinking, this is so sad, this landscape. There's nothing here. It's barren. It is completely barren. And I'm thinking, well, I say so much about trees, but I'm also thinking, well, there's no buildings, there's no nothing. And so there's a time in our history that I really need to connect with where everything seems to be incredibly removed. One movement out there as well is this tree thing, right? And somebody was making a point really recently. They said, well, if you look at Neolithic Britain, the argument by some scholars still is that Neolithic man removed all the trees in Britain, and therefore, I don't go with that. But somebody said more practical. If you want to go with this theory about Neolithic people removing all the trees in Britain, and you think, well, you know, in the early Neolithic, there's probably just over 100,000 people. It's not possible for them to remove a large amount of trees, let alone all the trees, right? So So the point I'm trying to make, so our archaeology in Britain is so different than any other archaeology on the planet. It's unbearably difficult to understand because so much is gone. So when I come to those analogies of saying, when we want to look at the idea of the Roman past in Britain, and I say, look, there's like between 0 point something and 0.5%. We're not talking about 5%, 0.5% the Roman landscape left. I'm so close to the mark. And then we talk about if we want to talk about the medieval landscape of Britain, right? It's in the low percentages of the stuff that survived. So back to the point. So I'm looking at the landscape, and there's nothing. There's nothing older than 300 years ago, other than the stuff under the surface. I thought I wanted to make that point. So that goes into where we are now. So let's sort of go to where we are now. I wanted to express that. Sort of got something from that. I know some of you might think, oh, there's answers to that. Things have changed, but what I'm saying is that things have changed differently in Britain. There's something missing about the understanding and looking at the landscape. There's so much which is gone, and again, back to that point, you look at other countries, and there's so much you can still find, right? So what we've got is there. Oh God, hang on a minute. And okay, analyze. Hang on. No, we don't want to do that. Something happening. So go to pictures. Yeah, so incredibly, we've got all of these things to look at. Yeah, and yeah, somebody said that I look very similar to how Caligula is portrayed in this film from 1979. I look nothing like him, for God's sake. But anyway, that's what they were making a bit of a fuss about last night. So obviously we do have a little bit of a fun on the Tuesday class. We got Roger the Dodger. You don't know about that. And obviously I was having to put this card out every time last night. Stop talking about the Caligula film. But I decided to pull my finger out, and I decided to contact my Nancy. Right, Nancy now is the director and main archaeologist, and she runs it as her company for Prospect Archaeology, which is Leeds, Yorkshire. Right, and I just realised I realised I got this sort of friend that I could have spoken to and sort of contacted, and we could have had a jam. And she's so much like me, and so I reached out to her, and I wanted for her to tell me in her own words about this metal object that was excavated in London in 2003. This little sort of pinball. So she actually, when I emailed her, she emailed me straight back, and it was like old times, just straight away. So she sent me this email, and there is all well, thanks. I hope you are too. And the pot is actually on show. So before we go on to the email, right, it's this pot, okay? And allow Anne on, and we got a full group. So she basically, this was about this pot. We've raised it for the past 2 weeks. So we're back on it. And she said she was actually the one managing the project that they found the pot 22 years ago. 22 years ago, wow. So the pot is actually on show in the London Museum. There you go, or it at least it was last time I was there. Obviously the cream is gone, but there is a bit of information about it here. And I just thought, one thing about the cream, I thought, well, where's the cream, But I think the question was they needed to analyze it, and obviously you couldn't keep the cream there. But you've got the fingerprints and all the analysis to do with that. I don't have there's no analysis about the fingerprints and male and female and all that gubbins that they promised back in 2003. But what we do have, we've got more information that I haven't told you. And this box is really significant because this little tin alloy canister, yeah. So I got this to read out, and we're going to do that. And there's a she went out of her way, and she a pre-construct archaeology that she used to work for. So she got the book, and she copied the 2 pages, and she attached it as a scan. It's okay. It's an okay scan, and hopefully I'll keep in touch with her more. So this is an image directly from the London Museum, and I feel I feel I don't know if it's me, but I feel that there's not enough information about these things on the internet, right? There's just not, there's not enough information. You're looking at this and you're thinking, well, we've got these details, right? But when I'm doing research, lots of the times it's just not the stuff out there. It's just almost as if we're seeing what people want us to read. So so I've had to go to source, and I've had to get the information directly off her because she excavated it. She knew where to go and I didn't. So on the Museum of London website, it's got some information which I'm just going to read out, and then we're going to go to the book. So it's described small canister with close fitting lid. We know that. After excavation, conservators, 2003, found that it still contained a soft cream which is being chemically analyzed as a cosmetic or face cream. So I think that's not where we got last time. They were and ahhing in 2003 if that was that. So we've got an answer. We've got one answer. So, but we've got more information from this, and we've got more information from the article that I'm going to read out from the book. So the cream contained animal fat with mixed starch and with tin oxide added. Now that's really interesting. Well, in the other article, it's got more information about the animal fat content and the association of this artifact with other stuff that was found with, which is equally fascinating. So it's talking about tin oxide, and I felt this was really interesting because you've got tin oxide being used mixed with the starch and animal fat, but the box is this little metal box, 2.5 inches high. This little metal box itself is made of a tin alloy, and if you look, it's coated with a tin as well. So it's quite odd that you've got tin being used in the cream, and the tin is actually being used as like a pseudo temporary glaze. So we use tin as a glazing agent in pottery slipping, instead of lead lots of the times, and they've always used tin anyway. So this container as well, if we sort of run through these sort of summary information, it's a container found in the excavations temple complex in Tabard Square in Southwark, 2003. It had been placed along with other ritual items as an offering to the gods in boundary ditch surrounding the temples. Now, I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, well, if this is found by a metal detecting enthusiast, the first thing they're going to want to do is open the box, and then all the information that was subsidiary to it being opened would have been lost. You can imagine, oh, there's a little box in the ground, let's open it. The archaeologists didn't do that. They took it to a laboratory and opened it that way, right? So the only thing missing from this, because it was sort of pseudo vacuum sealed in the past, it was airtight. Well, obviously that was not the intention, but maybe it was. I don't know. But obviously the only thing missing from is the tin oxide coating from the outside. There's bits of it, but not massively. You see little bits there. It's really nice. To me, this looks really Victorian, to be honest with you. If I saw this in an antique shop, definitely Victorian, was not Roman. From AD 150. So few examples of cosmetic creams survived from the Roman period per se, end of whatever. And the soft paste started solidifying as soon as the pot was opened. And obviously that sulfurous smell that came away when they opened it. So rather than being full of sulfur, it was a sulfurous smell, right? There's difference there. So the fan starch mixed together in the correct proportions would have provided a skin moisturizer, while the tin oxide gave the complexion a translucent glow. So it's exactly the same that you would see with pottery firing. You'd have like a glaze on the outside. So this is a tin alloy canister, and we don't know who made it. We know it's AD 150, and obviously the size itself, 2.5 inches 53 millimeters. And so when you put this in context with the past, and you try and juxtapose this with the past and try and understand this, one of the things that really sticks out is that this is so special and precious. But as I was reading out the article, as we did bit last week and the previous week, as I was reading out the article, I think the point that I was trying to make and trying to sort of put across is that this was a popular thing back in the past. People would have had these things, and these little compacts, but only one has survived. Only one of these things has survived, which gives it another take. The problem is in archaeology, when we have these things surviving, right, from this context, from a ditch associated with the temple and suburbs, when we have this one little box surviving, everyone gets excited and says, oh, this is like, yeah, we do get generally excited, we do, but I think the other thing that people get excited, think, oh, there's only one of these ever been made on the history of the planet, and this is the only little box, this is the only thing to ever contain cream that people would have used in the past. It's not. There would have been millions of these things. There's only one thing left. And this gets me to talk about something else. It really does. Now, this is sort of a passion thing with that we look at heritage and history. One thing that I really sort of struggle with is that when we're trying to get Goff knows about this. We've got a small short film that we're doing, which is about 40 odd minutes long, and we're making that, and Goff knows about it. And I've got a dress in a German uniform, right? And it's been censored. I can't put sort of death caps and stuff on the side because the censors won't allow it. I can't show Nazi memorabilia and stuff. Fair enough. Okay, that's the world we live in. However, trying to get a top which is genuine or pseudo genuine is really difficult, right? And they're very expensive, right? So we're going another back door, and we're getting a West German uniform from about 1952, 1953, which was similar to the ones, and we're using that. The point is I'm trying to make is that at one stage there would have been in the region of 15 to 20 million German uniform tops at one stage, right? And now there's so few. They've been burnt, they've been destroyed, they were disposed of, they were reused, blah blah. And the helmets, typical uniform, typical helmets, lots of them were sort of then went to the Chilean army to be used and whatever. The point is I'm trying to make is even close proximities in time, just over 85 years ago, the bits of history are getting rarer and rarer. We talk about how many Spitfires are left, and there's not many, right? When there were thousands of them. How many Tiger tanks, Mark 1, Mark 2, whatever, there were thousands, and now we've only got one or two. How many V1 rockets were there? And you just think, well, if we're getting problems with big things being lost, and even though people are interested in them, right, and wanting to use them, right, then there's a dynamic between this type of thing in the past, that there were millions of these ones, and now there's only this one with the cream in it, right? That's the point I'm trying to make. So they're now incredibly extinct and rare, but one time they were plentiful. I hope you're seeing the point I'm trying to make. So when Nancy got this book and she said, right, okay, let's just sort of photocopy these for Karl, and that's what she did. And the pages that she copied from this book, and obviously, I might get this book and I might use it in a lecture, and because it's fascinating. And the reason why it's fascinating is because of the stuff I'm going to tell you now, associated with what this being found. It's a pottery dump. There's glass in there. There's wood. Really interesting. It's really interesting. So we're gonna read this out because I've got the copies in front of me. So we don't really. South bank of the River Thames, Tabard Square. They found more than two temple sites, I think, and there's loads of ditches, right? So the ditch that this stuff was found in, which is ditch 8, right? and there's loads of different phases with the ditch, you know, and the it's what we interpret from this is that lots of even there were pots in there that were intact, right? So this wasn't a ditch that people were fundamentally chucking stuff into and discarding them, and the things broken. They were placed into the ditch. It was known as a Nessos ditch. Some people say it was a drainage ditch. Whatever focus the ditch is, which will for another story, there's loads of layers of backfill in there, right? So with the loads of layers of backfill, we get this little box, right? Now, this is the point with this type of archaeology associated with temples, right? There's loads of bloody stuff associated with them. When I always quote the Mithras temple, I remember it was a lad that may have come to my class in Bridgend or somewhere, right? And I don't know, but Anne might know, but basically we had somebody turning up one day and said, "Oh, I was there when they excavated the Temple of Mithras, right? And in 1956, before it was moved to down the road, and then it was moved back to where it is now under the Bloomsburg building. You know, it moved up the road, and then they moved it back, and it's back at its original spot. So when they were excavating, there were thousands upon thousands of pottery lamps that had been dumped. Right, people would go to there and they burn a pottery lamp, and the blooming the priest in the Temple of Mithras and would say, "Oh my God, we've got thousands of these now. We'll just chuck them in the ditch." Right. So for the next few years, people would keep bringing pottery lamps. So when they excavated in 1956 the Temple of Mithras site, they people could go there and pick up a lamp and go home with it. Right, because there were thousands of them. The archaeologists didn't know what to do with them. Now that just wouldn't happen, right? Because we'd analyze them all and so on, right? But the point is, with this being excavated in a professional conditions, obviously finding a pot and all the pottery, and there's a bit of a skull there. There we go. So we got this, and it's a fascinating thing. I really would like to do this, get hold of this book and do it. So we know that the ditch was sealed by the later part of the 100s. So the little sort of tin box that we call it, the little sort of tin box that we've shown you and I got really excited about, which has got the cream in it, that was found in amongst this, and it was sealed then for forever, you know. So until it was actually excavated. Actually, I'm showing you the text, and I don't need to because I've got the text in front of me. So there's another image of the pin box. So a striking feature of this ditch was the frequency of finds in all categories that were being deposited in it. We've got pottery, we've got glass, we've got leather, we've got wood, we've got all sorts of stuff in there, right? So this is a really interesting. This is a really interesting thing indeed, massively interesting. And it's a notable feature on the landscape. Usually with ditches like this associated with the Temesos, which is the area of the temple, you've got a ditch around the outside. These things would usually be sort of cleaned out, you know, but this ditch where people had probably been putting stuff in and usually what it's, and I used to do this little scenario, didn't I, in lectures when I used to take people to the temple site in Caerwent. I used to say, you know, you go to the temple site and there's like a little booth outside, and you say, "Oh, you know, here's a couple of shekels, right? Can I have a statue of Lloyd George?" Right? So you take the little statue of Lloyd George and then you put it at the end of the temple, and they think, "Oh my God, we've got all these statues of all these deities and stuff, you know, blah blah blah." So then they would pick up all these things and they would resell them to people. They would remarket them and sell them. In this instance, with the ditch, there was so much people bringing so many votive things to the temple, including this pin box, that somebody said, "Right, whip it off the blooming altar and just chuck it in a bucket and just chuck it in the ditch." Like this is what you could probably think about and sort of associate with. So the fascinating with this wonderful little box. So it's going back to my notes again. So sorry to obsess about this, and people get if you get a bit bored of this, I'm not. So this truly remarkable sealed canister, and I got a little bit more information about the sealed canister from this text, right? So obviously in the London Museum have got what they've got on display. So the canister laboratory situation, upon later opening, it was revealed that the contents consisted of a white greasy preparation. That's a nice term to use, white greasy preparation. And one thing that we were talking about this when it was portrayed in the newspaper article from 2003, which I kept, and obviously Nancy Rosenberg's in there, and I thought, "Oh wow, you know, I know her. We used to. I'll tell you a little bit about Nancy. We met up one day in Shrewsbury, and bit nuts like me, and we had a coffee and whatever, and we went down this side street, and we were really into bricks, stuff, and we went to this one brick, and I said, oh, I've got a technique that you can sort of, if you taste the brick, right, you can work out if it's from like the Roman period or whatever. So we were eating little bits of brick, right, and we were thinking, oh right, that's like Tudor, isn't it, and stuff. And weirdly enough, we had a group of tourists behind us, and they gathered behind us, and and the tour guide said, this is terrible. This is archaeologists eating the remains of wars in Shrewsbury. And an American tourist said, oh, well, that's what they do with the history and archaeology of Britain. They eat it. So they went home seeing these two nutty archaeologists eating the archaeology. So that's my introduction to Nancy. So basically, when we go back to looking at this sort of the preparation in here, is that when it was described in the newspaper, it said only the fingerprints were in the lid, but they're actually in the main body as well. So you got lots of, a woman whipping. But this is the point, you see. I wanted to know if because I think somebody did some more research. It's somewhere, I'm sure it is, but I couldn't find it. That somebody did some research who worked out that they were actually fingerprints of a woman, or this had been used by a man or a woman or a child, but I don't know at that stage still. So we got the fingerprints into the cream, and the composition of the preparation was found to be fatty acids of animal origin. We sort of know that, but it's the fatty acids. But the origins of the fat are actually from a sheep or cattle, which is quite an unusual conclusion to make. I would believe that now. This was from work published in 2004. I don't think if anyone's touched it since. But the sheep or cattle sort of fat acids, and we've got a starch, and we've obviously got tin oxide, and the preparation had very probably been used as a cosmetic, although it contained no trace of perfume. So if they'd gone that deep, surely we could maybe understand what animal it was, precisely. So there was no perfume in it. So is this actually used by a woman? Is it used by a man? There's no medicinal value either. Could be deduced from the mixture or component present. There's nothing else in it. You could have probably used it as a compress, actually, if you've got some kind of wound, as I've used with my own animals. We sort of, not animals, it's been used on a human, but compresses work the same way to sort of stop infection, stop oxygen. You use the compress. That's what you use a compress for. So you could maybe use a compress. So it may have had a medicinal, but there's no real clear sign that it was medicinal, right? More so, they're saying that the most probable use was a lightening skin tone. Michelle uses it because she's got a skin condition which makes her skin go red, and so she sort of uses this, but she uses something to lighten the skin. So possibly as a foundation layer. And the use of fats and starch in such products is well attested. They actually use fats and starches today. Obviously, you've got warnings if you go to something like Boots. It said, is there animal fats in it? Or if there's starches in it, we're allergic to starch. That type of thing. So the tin oxide is there to sort of give a white opaque tone to the face, or lighten the level of sort of the fats. To sort of, the tin oxide been added. So sort of glaze, or sort of make a sort of opaque shine to the skin. This is what we're talking about, and this is what you would use tin for in firing pottery, if you're slipping pottery. So I haven't got anything more on a page other than a little table which we're going to show you in a short while. As stated by the pottery, the vessels, and all the loads of pottery. So what we've got, we've got all the pottery found. Some of them were actually intact. That's the point. And so it's not like a refuge thing. These things were discarded with contents. It seems a bit crazy, really. We're a wasteful society in a modern day and age, right? But back then they were the same. We waste things today. We wasted things back in not really. But the thing is, this is naturally associated with the temple, so it's not just sort of go into your local sort of McDonald's and chucking things in a ditch. This is like specific. You go into temple, placing things in the temple, and the things from the temple end up in the ditch. Or maybe people put things in a ditch, added to the assortment of stuff in the ditch. Well, if you think about that, what springs to mind if you go to Herr Schindler's tomb in Jerusalem, for example, there's a massive stack of white stones. Herr Schindler, Schindler's List. In Jewish graves, for example, they got big stacks of white stones, and you're thinking, well, this could have worked similarly, that people have got a ditch and they just add stuff to the ditch, and eventually it's covered over, and that's Bob's your uncle. So, but it's the frequency of finds, and could this have been a little bit of a water course as well, and the items that sort of cleansed as they're put into the water? We see this as sort of a ritual reinforcement when you might have put things in sort of a damp, sort of muddy pseudo ditch. Whatever's going on there, it's sort of well attested with sort of pinwells, for example. And so one last thing I want to show you in connection with this, because we've got to move on. So let's sort of go. There's a little bit of a table there. I've not got the full. Yeah, I've got the full thing there. Just one thing I want to mention. So with the ditch, you've got period 5, you've got to period 7, you've got to period 8. Period 8 is the period that this item was found in. So this is the last period, and not so long after that, the ditch is filled in. Sort of give you sort of so some of the earlier periods, it's got another ditch mentioned there, which we'll ignore for the sake of promptness. So in the ditch, through different periods, as you can see, from 5 to 8, there's animal bone being placed in there, which is then associated with pottery. Now, when it says number of pottery sherds, a pottery sherd, it might relate to one single complete pot, or a pottery sherd relating to 100 pieces, which have been broken in time and ended up. So we weigh these things. And when you think about that, period 5, you got 45 kilograms of pottery, right? Which is that's a lot of bits of pottery. 45 kilograms of pottery. It's a lot of pottery in there. Got bits of human remain in sort of earlier periods, which is really odd. What bit, maybe a broken finger, not broken finger, you've lost your finger, you've put it in a ditch, whatever. So small finds as well, things like styluses and stuff. And I think when you're talking about when the small finds, you're talking about this little box in sort of period 8. There it is. There's 2 of them there. You've got coins, not many of them. This is really interesting. If now this might answer what's going on with the ditch, right? There's probably no coins in there, right? Simply because these items have been cleared from the temple, on a regular basis and dumped in the ditch and disposed of. Hence why there's very few coins, because the coins are going to have value, and therefore you're going to use the coins to keep the temple going or fill your own pockets. So that's why there's no. That's why 8 coins is not a lot over sort of 60, 70 years. And bits of leather, bits of leather work, and sort of and what they're saying is, this is really interesting, number of deposits in ditch. So what we're talking about is times that stuff is deposited in there. Maybe this was an infrequent temple that people visited at certain festivals, and there we got. So this is really interesting. So period 8, we got 15 deposits. That means that 15 are tested arrangements of pottery. So 10 bits of pottery and sort of that little deposit and whatever. So it might mean that somebody has customary cleaned out the temple and then dumped stuff in the ditch. Well, that's my idea anyway. So there we go. That's the little box explained. And it was asked, can you explain a little bit more about Caligula? Does Caligula deserve this bad press that he's got? And I'm actually a big fan of Caligula, right? And they were taking the mickey out of me last night and saying, oh, you're a big fan of Caligula because you look like him. But the uncut version of this is now on Amazon, with Malcolm McDowell playing Caligula as the lead and Helen Mirren. Yeah, and we won't say anymore, right? So the original version in 1979 was not was the
He,
was the cut version, right? So now on Amazon, you've got the full uncut version. And apparently on Amazon, there's so much sex in it that there's so much bondage and whatever that one of our members on a Tuesday started watching it, and she had to go off and have a cold shower afterwards. She only watched 10 minutes of it. So the reason why I'm actually mentioning this and sort of saying, you know, this and whatever, is that does Caligula deserve this bad press? And I'm saying he doesn't deserve it. Caligula was a great monument builder. You know, we think about the three wooden massive boats that were on Lake Nemi that he had made. We think about the aqueducts that he was responsible for building, the military bases he was responsible for building. He was only Roman emperor for a few years. You know, wasn't a Roman emperor for 5 years. You know, he's for a small number of years. And his family had been wiped out, so he was a really sort of angry little upstart, right? And then he was killed, and then only to leave a blithering idiot of Claudius to be Roman emperor to accordingly invade Britain in AD 43, as amongst other provinces. So I thought then, when I was putting this together, I thought somebody mentioned the Lydians. Right, and they said the Lydians different from the Lycians, and I said, yeah, the Lydians are the big green bit, and the Lycians are at the bottom. Now, remember when we did the Lycians? Was it last week? We mentioned about the Lycians with their sense of democracy, with their sense of having, like, you know, not having a big army and all the rest of it, you know, and so on. They sort of gave us a contribution, the Lycians. And when we mentioned the Achaemenids last week, I mentioned, you know, created roads and so on. But between Thrace, which we've already done Thrace, and the people of Thrace, and as warlike people and so on, and having their identity, and obviously coming a cropper with the Macedon and the Persians and so on. So I really thought that if we're gonna eventually look at sort of the way the Roman army is and the way they conquer things, right? You've got to do the Achaemenids, which the First Persian Empire, but you've also got to do the Lydians, right? So when you think about the Lydians, you're thinking about the Lydians were really the first people to sort of unify this sort of world, right? Unify Turkey. Turkey itself is a very, very difficult world to control, right? You've got so much going on. You've got you've got people from the north, sea people from the north. You've got the Greeks from the likes of the west. You've got the Egyptians from the south, you know, and you've obviously got all the people to the east, right? And usually all those people to the east, you know, the Persians. And one of the things, and this is where we get the idea of east and west, right? So and the idea of east and west has been misinterpreted over the years. So we talk about the modern interpretation of east and west is when we look at, for example, the Crusades. You know, we think about the Crusades in the late 1000s, we think about the Crusades in the 1100s, and obviously silly King Richard in 1199, and we talk about all these crusades to the Holy Land, and therefore from that moment onwards you look at east and west as the west being everything sort of there, sort of where it's got the word Lydia, and you've got the Byzantine Empire, so everything sort of west of there and Thrace, that's sort of, you know, the Western world, and everything east of there is, you know, Cappadocia, and sort of then you look sort of beyond the Holy Land, you know, that's the Eastern world. But and then you've got this sort of dynamic between the people in the West are Christian and the people in the East are Mohammedans. Yeah, so I can't use the I word anymore. I got to call them Mohammedans. But the fact of the matter is, so you've got those two religious splits between Christianity and the Mohammedans in the East. Now, this is where, but the original idea of the East and the West, right, is really between sort of when you look at the Greek world and the Roman world, Anatolia, Turkey, the people in the east are the Persians, right? And that's quite clear. This is where we get the idea of east and west from. So, and then we've got a distorted idea of the east and west when we look at the fracture in the Roman Empire. So we've got the Western Roman Empire collapsing in 476. with Rome itself finally falling into Audacia, who'd been sort of a general fighting for Romulus, who turned on Rome, blah, blah, blah. Another lecture, long time off. And then we got the East being the Eastern Roman Empire, right? So we got another, so the idea of East and West is always typically within this area, right? And that's where we get the concept of East and West, and the boundaries and the interpretation of what East and West means has changed over the years. And you don't need to remind me that when you've got Berlin and you've got the Russians on that side of Berlin, and you've got the Americans, the British, and the French on that side of Berlin, right? You got the East and the West side, right? But then you've got the sort of official split of West Germany and East Germany, right? And you've got all that being sorted out by about 1951, again, that date. So you've got the East and the West, the fight between East and the West. So the people have owned the word East and West, having different meanings over time. But the original interpretation of East and West is here now, going back to beyond 500 years BC. So I want to chuck that in there. So the Lydians themselves, sort of, we couldn't sort of do the Lydians. We couldn't sort of do the Achaemenids using this area, the Lydians, as a conduit to actually get to the West, for example, to challenge Rome, to challenge Greece, to challenge everything else that's going on. But and obviously we mentioned Alexander the Great and a conquest of the Achaemenid Empire and the First Persian Empire in the year 330 BC. Yeah, so when we think about the Lydians, and what I think, obviously not to mix up the Lydians with the Lycians. This is why we've got the two on the screen. Right, we've got to really make that clear. So I think when I'm trying to do history and trying to put the archaeology in here, right, it's always upsetting to use terms like Iron Age when you're talking about the Lydians. They're far from being Iron Age, and the Lycians are far from being Iron Age, right? Even though we say they're Iron Age. The early stages of the Roman world and the Carthaginians, Iron Age, but they're not. They're sort of in, because the Iron Age really is associated with obviously the use of iron, but not with the use of having a written record, which these people were having a developed written record at that stage, right? So we try and keep our minds away from the sense of using the word Iron Age. But one thing that we really think about the Lydian world is that the Lydian world is one of those worlds that is sort of if we look at the Lydian world and we look at Cappadocia and we sort of Scythia, which is on the east end side, just above the little chart that says Kingdom of Lydia. That's where the Hittites were. And there's a little bit of a story that I need to tell you. So the Lydians are sort of coming into, the Lydians are like mentioned when we, it's a long time ago, folks. It's like 1,000 years ago since we had the pandemic. But there was one set lecture about the sea people. And we're talking about the sea people, where did the sea people out? Who are they? Are the Mycenaeans, which is on just off this map, sort of a mainland Greece, sort of above Athens, whatever. The Mycenaeans, were they the sea people about 1,200 years BC? And then they were coming across the Lydians. They were going to come across the Hittites, and they eventually went all the way down into the Lydians were saying, "Oh, please help us, ancient Egypt, please help us, ancient Egypt." 1,200 years ago, but ancient Egypt eventually fought against the sea people, whoever they were, if they are the Mycenaeans, and they eventually the Egyptians eventually defeated the Mycenaeans. Even the Mycenaeans had iron swords, and the Greek and the Egyptians didn't. But what? Who the hell is this? Richard, who is this? Whoever it is, someone's just joined us. Are you all still there, guys?
Yeah.
Who's just joined us?
Well, I was the last one.
Oh, somebody just joined us. I don't know who this is.
Audio.
Whoever they are.
Oh.
Who?
It says
Anyway.
It says
Anyway, Anne, forget it. We'll crap on with it. So the point is that what we're talking about with this world, right? What we're talking about with this world is that when we talk about the Mycenaeans, we're talking about them coming across the Lydians. So the idea of Lydia and the idea of these people and the Hittites by around 700 years BC, which is still in the period of the Greek Dark Ages. You know, we got this idea that we don't really know what's going on in Greece around this time, but what we do have is an idea what's going on in ancient Egypt. What we do have is an idea what's going on in Lydia and Lycia, and then the old kingdom of the Hittites. So what you've got then is then you look at the Babylonians, and you're looking at the emergence of the Persians, right? The first Persian world. So now last night, and I'm going to tell you this because we're going to mention Cyrus the Great, right? Which has been on the news recently. Donald Trump's been referred to as the new Cyrus the Great, right? But that's to do with the Achaemenids, right? Which is quite weird. I'm talking about this, and somebody said, "Oh, Donald Trump's been compared with Cyrus the Great," and I thought, "Oh my God, not in my lecture tonight." But anyway, the point is that when there's actually, you learn from history. When you start to learn from history and you understand it, right? That's where you got people quoting Cyrus the Great, right? Because it's linked in with the stuff that we're doing tonight. So when we got the kingdom, what we've got the likes of Herodotus writing, telling us about Lydia, for example. He's telling us about Lycia, but we've also got the likes of Herodotus, and you know, he's got his sort of, according to Herodotus, there's legends associated with Lycia, with Heracles, and so on and so on. And then what we then get to is then we start thinking about the first great king of this kingdom, which is dating back to we've got a date here, 660 years BC. Love it. You know, a leader that lasted a nice period of time. So what we've got here is that we've got these leaders. You know, we've got stuff going on from 680 BC, but the kingdom really didn't last for a massive length of time. It lasted for a period of about 140 years. Well, actually, you know, not too far off that, where you've got the end of the reign of Croesus, right, who's defeated by the Achaemenids, right? So you've got the collapse of this kingdom, fall to Persia, and then you've got the story that then leads to 330, where you know the great savior of the former Lydian world is this sort of great hero. Yes, he is. He comes into it, Alexander the Great, in 330 years BC. So you know, then we look at these leaders. Now, what we've got is we've got some nice fixed dates. We've got coins being circulated by this world, right? Now, I mentioned that the Lycians were some of the first people to use coinage, but the people to actually use it as a universal circulation monetary system was actually the likes of the Lydians. So what we're talking about is that we've got these five main leaders of the Lydian world, and there's sort of stable leaders. We you know, Gyges at the beginning, 680, and then we got Croesus at the end in 546 BC. So and guess what? The money was actually called the Croesus, named after Croesus, who wasn't the first leader to actually use the likes of coinage, which spread across the world. So when again, another kick at the Romans, right? If anyone ever says to you, the Romans, what did the Romans ever do for us? They did peace, they did this and that, but what we do talk about and what we do think about is that the Lydians actually brought us a circulation coinage, right? People were within the Lydian world, they were using coinage, so it made it very attractive for the Persians to invade this land, right? Lots of the I can remember when these coins bring me into telling you a little bit of a story, and one of those little pros when I was in you know, when I was in the first year of comprehensive school, the teacher said, "Oh, can you?" I don't know what class it was, but it wasn't history. One of the teachers, he said, "Oh, can you write a little bit of a story?" So I thought, right, I'll write a story about a coin. It's a Roman coin that ends up being used in a market stall, and it ends up going down a drain, and it ends up going in the soil, and it ends up going in a collection, and blah blah blah. And then I tell a story, say, actually, the coin remained almost exactly the same as when it was lost. These coins look the same, right? They really, really do. So what I did is to sort of give you a little bit of an epaulet, sort of an epitaph in a way, of what this world was like. I thought, right, let's just give you a little bit of substance into this sort of world. And I dug up this nice little article in Egypt Today, which was the first currency in history, Kingdom of Lydia, minted gold and silver coins. Love it. So we had a little bit of a debate last night with, oh yeah, this coin, it's looks so pure, it looks so wonderful. You can imagine this was like tossing around in your pocket for about 10 years and then it was lost. It's so clear. It's like something from a time machine. You're looking at this and you're thinking, wow, this looks so fresh. This looks so amazing. What you've actually got at the bottom, right? We have to make sure that we did refer to that at the bottom as a crocodile, not an alligator. We don't get alligators in Egypt. But that crocodile may represent crocodiles that may have existed in the Euphrates and the Tigris, and I still believe that they still do. That beast there on the left-hand side, that sort of represents sort of a mountain lion, right? And you're thinking, well, the Lydians, the sort of people up in the hills, and you've got the bull there on the right, and you're thinking maybe this coin represents bits of the country, what these people are about. The bull from the idea of Greece. So the Lydians were sort of a Greco type people, right? As much as being an Eastern Asia Minor type people, but you've got the crocodile there as well, so giving you sort of a sense of their world. So the ancient kingdom of Lydia, and what we'll do, we'll have probably a little bit of a break, sort of halfway through this piece. We'll have a nice little cajoled chat, and so the kingdom of Lydia was a flourishing world, and you start to think, well, they're not really prehistoric people, are they? Their capital city was there at Sardis, and you're thinking of two words there: Troy, yes, Troy, and Ephesus, obviously the later sort of Greek library, the great later sort of Roman library of Ephesus. Troy itself, yes. Troy didn't disappear on a Wednesday afternoon after the stories associated with Homer's Iliad, right, and the destruction of Troy. Troy continued after that point. So we've got that mentioned, and we've got that sort of picture in history. So when you think about in the beginning, the coins were not more than just pieces of metal with simple engravings. In the beginning, they soon developed into beautiful artistic engravings featuring characters from Greek mythology representing who they are and being a monetary system. You could say that something like this was the social media event of the day. Social media, look at all these look at all these golden sort of nuggets, and you're thinking, OMG. And these are probably nuggets which have been hammered, or natural nuggets, or basically nuggets that are just a bit. Put a bit of drip of gold on there. We'll hammer it. Either side, job done. This is what we're talking about. So the ancient Lydians invented coins as a means of authenticating payment, and that is not as simple as it sounds, right? Coins as a means of authenticating payment, because I don't know, Anne, if you can remember Ivan the Terrible, but Ivan the Terrible, a nice chap who helped me out back in the day, right? 2007, really nice chap. He said, "Oh, I'll put a lecture together for you." So I thought, "Oh, okay, Ivan, yeah, that's nice. So he said, "I'll put a lecture together for you about coins," right? So he said in the pack there was like a big silver American dollar, right? And then there was these two sort of these bronze bracelet things, and I thought, okay. And then then there was a load of cowrie shells, and I thought, oh, all right. And then there was a bag of teeth, and I thought, And then I looked at the notes, and he said, this is a lecture about items which have a monetary value, but not necessarily that very passage where it says the ancient Lydians invented coins as a means of authenticating payment. People may have been using items for a long time as a way of sort of a way of trading objects, but they weren't coins. So the difference is that other stuff that's been used for maybe hundreds of years before that is not the same as coins for authenticating payment. So coins represent a fundamental change in the human world. And I got to let this silly cat out. Morgoth, you are a Dark Lord, and if you want to go outside, go now. I'm in the middle of this. So what we've got is this sort of juncture, coins, this juncture, give or take a few years before 600 years BC. And coins being used for trade. This is really important. And then this leads us in with the sort of Silk Route. It leads us in with sort of China. It leads us in with the Roman world. So the Roman world is not the world that sort of sees coinage as its way of controlling people, right? Which it's a modern issue, isn't it? We're sort of about to control people. You today we're talking about crypto coins. We're talking about our money just being sort of money put into our bank accounts is not going to be physical money, blah blah blah. It's going to be credit cards, and that's the only thing we're going to do. We're not actually going to have physical money. But so people say, get paranoid, say, oh, it's a way of controlling people, by having sort of automated money just going in our bank accounts, just using cards and having no physical money. It's a way of controlling us. But you could talk about in the Roman world, coinage is a way of controlling people. This is not this. It would be cynical for me to say that this was a way that the Lydian world had of controlling the people. It was probably more practical that they needed to come up with something that was far better than cowrie shells, which they wouldn't have used anyway. But that's not the point. Teeth, better than a bag of teeth, right? So the Lydia kingdom of Anatolia, we said sort of first major kingdom of Anatolia with a massive bent or raison d'etre with the Greek world. It was only natural that coins produced there were of shiny gold and silver. And at that moment, we're gonna take a little bit of a break, and we'll mention this is the Lydian lion head Solon. And there he is bearing out. There we go. He's a lion's head, right? With a mane there. There's a Lydian lion head of Solon. And I think that's a really nice place to stop. So what we're going to do, a little bit more about coins afterwards, and then we'll go into the Achaemenids. Bob's your uncle, Fanny's your aunt. Happy days. So let's just get into it. So there. Okay. Oh, we got Billis.
Hello, Carl. Nice to see you again. How are
Nice
you?
to see you again, Bill. We didn't know we had your mic's a bit buggered, but that's life.
Yeah, I thought I'd say hello.
Hello.
Hello, Pat. Hello.
Hello.
Nice
Hello,
to
Anne.
see you, Bill. By
Hello,
the way,
everyone.
I've got a dodgy
Hello.
postcard coming your way.
Oh, good. I hope it's quite good, is it? As usual.
All right then. Well, we'll go and make a cup of coffee then.
Hang on a minute, we haven't got any questions. Right, so Goff, anything you'd like to say?
No questions at the moment, thank you.
What about you, Richard?
No, nothing from me.
The cat wants his dinner, so we'll have a little break. So Pat, anything from you?
No, thank you.
Anything from Christine Lolo?
I was going to interrupt and say zinc and castor oil were used for a lot. Well, actually, they're still used in creams and things, but those were the basis of a lot of creams. So where did they get zinc from?
I didn't mention zinc.
No, I know. You're saying tin, but I just thought of zinc.
Obviously, zinc is used in brass. So the Romans didn't have brass.
Anyway, that's
so...
probably not. It's not the same as your because they did use animal fats. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
No.
But I'm just a little bit disappointed that I'm a bit greedy that I got Nancy to get me that stuff. We got a lot more information. We got answered loads of questions, and I actually want to know whether it was whether it was cow or sheep fat. You know, that's what I wanted to know. I wanted to know if the fingerprints within that sort of really nice little lid were and the base of it were actually male or female. I'm sure somebody did work on that, but obviously I'd love to know what happened to that cream. It must be in a sort of a freezer somewhere, but that's life.
Oh, okay then. Right.
Right. So actually, if it was found today, right, if it was found today, they could reconstruct that box, and they could
Yeah.
reconstruct it with a 3D printer, and they'd be able to get all the sort of fingerprint marks completely replicated as they are in the box. We could do that today, but obviously we can't. This was going back when they didn't have 3D printers. But hang on a minute. Hang on a minute. I think I might be wrong because the Americans did have earlier versions of 3D printers because there's one portrayed in the Jurassic Park films.
Yeah.
Mm. I'll look that up now. Right, Bill. Anything you would like to say?
No, have you missed me?
Oh, yeah.
Well, most of us have.
No way.
Of course. I haven't been able to get on for 3 weeks.
You haven't? Oh, well, yeah. I've been away as well doing things, so yeah. Nice to catch up anyway.
Yeah.
Well, keep on for after the break.
Okay then.
I said to Pat we should come to my steak one day.
Well, I'll tell you what, you must come to the new renovated town hall.
Yes, that's what I thought. Pat.
It is magnificent. You'll be
Yeah.
impressed. You really will.
You should.
So,
You still got trouble with your audio.
oh, I have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't hear me, can you?
No, it's just
Static.
crackling, you know.
Oh, I
Oh, I
see.
can hear you. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, you're okay. Yeah. So I don't know what's happening this end.
You're just a bit odd as usual, Bill.
Well, yeah, always have
I've
been.
I've actually found
It's all
out.
those years with you, Carl. That's what it is. That's what I know.
Exactly.
Oh, I know what. I met a lady in the hospital.
I met a lady as well, but I'm not telling you what I did with her. Go on.
When I went to have my eyes done, I met
Yeah.
a lady in the hospital, and she said she belonged to the Linfield History Society. And I said, do you know Bill Howells? Yes, she said, I know Billy.
I know Billy.
And
So-
I didn't get a name,
You didn't
I
get
can't
your name.
remember her name.
Well.
but she's
Well,
sort
well,
of, I think she might be a bit older than you, or maybe similar age.
Hang on,
Similar,
Bill's
yeah.
only 63. Right, okay.
60.
I want my
I'm
break
trying
in a
to
second. So,
remember it.
Richard, who else have we got to ask questions? Who's that there? Oh, Henry, go on.
Just a question about the coins.
Yeah.
Do they all have a common weight, or to
Yeah,
actually add a value?
Yeah, if you do, they managed to get a standardization of weight with the coins. Yes, they did. It's just depending on who's reigning and whatever. But then the idea of that sort of all these ideas that the Lydians are coming across, the standardized weight, the standardized money, the standardized representation. It's like an early form of Facebook where you've got different figures and things on the coins to actually put a message out there. This was all devised by the Lydians. So yeah, the standardization of the weight, the standardized currency, the standardized meaning is something that the Lydians actually gave us.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Right, so what we're going to do, guys, we're going to take a little bit of a break for it's 8:24. I want us to be back just before 8:40, so we'll crack on from there. I'll speak to you in a minute, guys, and you guys can chat to Bill whilst you're doing it.
That's okay. We'll have a chat.
Yeah. She more or less sounded like she'd gone to school with you or something, like as if she'd lived in my steak for a long time, you know.
Oh, what does she look like, Anne? Can you describe her?
Not tall,
Not short,
well dressed, you know.
of course.
She was a secretary.
A secretary.
She was a secretary all her life.
Right.
And,
Okay. Yeah.
I think it might have been Margaret. Is it Margaret?
Margaret. There's a Margaret Jones. There was a Margaret Jones. Yeah. Ah, how about Margaret Goldsworthy?
She was very nice, though.
Yeah.
You know,
Was
it
she
might have been Goldsworthy.
was she short and stocky?
Not stocky, no.
Oh, okay then. Yeah.
She might have lost weight, though.
There we are. So,
Oh,
are we-
sorry. You know, it's 4 weeks ago. It's gone. It's about a month ago, 2 months ago now.
so why were you in with your eyes?
Oh, having my injections, but she was having this as well.
In
You
your
know,
eye?
You got
You're right.
macular
Oh, that bit.
degeneration.
Ah, okay.
And she's
Yeah.
got it as well.
Ah.
But
Mm.
she's had it longer than me. But anyway, she's very nice, very, very
Yeah. Yeah.
cheerful sort of lady.
You and Pat must come up to my state town hall.
Yeah, we will. We can.
I'll show you around. Have a coffee. Show
Yeah,
you the history room as well. Yeah, you must do that.
yeah. Okay. When, Pat?
Let me know. They
Next
close
week?
on a Monday, so not
Did you say
Tuesday.
not a Monday?
Not a Monday, no. Probably not a Tuesday. Probably Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday. The
All right, then we'll see. I'll have a word with Pat. Look, she's looking down.
do that.
She's probably got loads of things coming up.
Yeah. Because
I'm supposed to
we
be
used
going
to
to
meet
the
on a
gym.
Friday, anyway, didn't we? In the Odeon Cinema one
Oh
time.
yeah.
Remember?
I don't mind going there. You know, it's just I don't see Phyllis or Glennis anymore.
No, of course not.
Glenda.
No.
Don't see Glenda anymore.
Anyway, how are you, Pat?
Right, okay,
Have
but
coffee.
You're
my
okay.
back is getting me. It's arthritis, so it's
Oh, right. Yeah, yeah.
curving over and
Very common.
time, yeah. So
But you're looking well, despite that.
thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Good for you. Keep smiling. Whatever
I
you
got
do.
a walker. I have to use a walker
have?
to go
Ah,
around town.
okay.
So
Yeah.
you know,
Well, if you come by bus, okay, the bus station is just outside the town hall.
oh, I think we drive. I could drive.
So you won't have to
Yeah.
walk far if you come by bus. If you
Okay.
come by car, it's about 100 yards, 200 yards from the
Yeah.
car park.
Right,
Anyway,
yeah.
up to you.
We'll make plans.
Big plans, that's it.
That'll be
Yeah.
lovely.
Yeah.
You gonna get a cup of tea?
I won't now. No, I've had my tea for the day.
Oh,
But if you want to go off and make a cup of tea, don't let me keep you.
okay. I'm off. I'm off.
No, me. Oh, she's gone. All gone. Right.
Bye. Hope you get rid of that noise.
Ears and fields, and these stones here were choked and covered with weeds. And the locals, well, they've been knocking them down to build their own houses. That was until 1649, when John Aubrey, a local landowner and keen amateur scholar, came here and discovered it whilst hunting. He was intrigued by this place. The problem for Aubrey was that the layout of the stones wasn't at all clear. It was impossible to simply record what he saw, because unlike today, the place was an overgrown mess. What he needed was to make an accurate survey, to understand it. To get a handle on how he achieved that using 17th century technology, I've roped in Mark Bowden from English Heritage. That's a lovely day for a bit of planning.
Yes.
So what should we do?
Let's set up round here, shall we?
Okay. Aubrey used scientific instruments, a plane table and Halliday, equipment more often used.
Yeah. Oh.
Let's crack on, bum boys. Are we all there?
Right.
Good. I had to mute Bill because he's on the phone or something. I'll allow him part blanche. There we go. Right. Okay, let's crack on. Bill, I had to mute you for a little bit, but I've given you. Oh, there we go. He can do it.
Yeah, I had a phone call, but okay
That's
now.
perfect.
Eh?
Sounds good.
Perfect. It's almost as if I want to jump in bed with you and have a conversation, Bill. It's perfect.
No, I skipped that one.
Well, I tell you what, right? There's, it's men wanting to keep each other warm. There's nothing wrong with that, Bill.
Well, we've shared a few cozy holes in the past, haven't we? Especially in Orkney together in the dark.
Well, that goes without saying. That really, really goes. That just.
Oh yeah, you, me, and the dog. Who can forget that?
Yeah, we don't talk about that. It's gone down in. But by the way, we missed out on the whiskey that day, Bill, because we ended up going in a hole.
No, I didn't. I had some from Julie.
Did you?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you had the whiskey. You had the whiskey, and you had some intimacy in a hole with me.
Yeah. Yes. She did. She was very generous. Had a bit of cake as well. How can you forget that?
I think you need to shut up. Right. Okay, then we're gonna crack on. So we'll probably go for about another half an hour or so, and then we'll probably call. And Bill, I don't know what was wrong with Bill's doodah really wrong, but actually, I've got to be honest with you. I've got to say this, folks, that last night we had somebody with the same problem. It was like the other way round because he kept saying he can't hear us. Right, so he left and then he came back and his mic was fine. So if any of you guys have got that problem in the future, just go out and come back in as no, Bill. I muted Bill and then I put him. So that's probably the way. But there's different ways of dealing with it, right? So let's go. Oh, by the way, I actually found out. I didn't know this, right? But the first patent for a 3D printer was I'm not going to even guess you, was in 1981.
Right.
The first 3D printer patent for a system that used UV light to harden resin layers. And then the technology started to sort of grow. The first commercial printer was in 1987 when most of us were using ZX Spectrum 48K plus.
Wow. Here we are.
Anyway, so I just wanted to put that in there. So we've done our doodah. So let's get back to this article. So obviously we've got this the head of Solon, and this is being this official Lydian currency became the official currency of the Lydian Empire, kingdom empire, which flourished for 120 years. It says many years, but it didn't flourish for a massive length of time. And the oldest coins on the planet ever are believed to date from the reign of King Alatus. And King Alatus reigned from AD 619 to AD 619. Start again. Let's do the dates again. King Alatus reigned from 619 to 560 years BC, and that's quite a long reign, to be honest with you, for any leader. So that's 59 years in power, King Alatus. And obviously we got King
BC.
Croesus.
BC.
Yeah. I said
It's
BC,
all
didn't
in
I?
the Bible.
619 BC to 560 BC, reigning for a whopping 59 years. Massive, that. So numismatists who study coinage agree that the Lydian coins themselves, from there they are. There's our friend there. There's our lying on the coin, our Solon, and amongst all of these coins as well. Numismatists say that this was the first official issued coin and served as a model for nearly all subsequent coinage elsewhere. Unlike the method used for bartering, where, obviously using shells or chickens' eggs or whatever, the coins were first issued by a central authority. That's key. Central authority, a central mint or government, and coinage was made of metal from this period onwards. So this again is one of those statements that I make. Rome. Actually, I got to be honest with you. What did Rome give us other than conquest? When they were made of a precious metal such as gold, the coins had their intrinsic value. Coins are also an amazing discovery because they are difficult to counterfeit, right? You can't really counterfeit shark's teeth, and you can't really counterfeit bronze bangles. But in regards to counterfeiting, obviously you can't make these of iron. They've got to be made of gold. Alchemists have tried to fake gold over the centuries, but haven't really worked. The best is electron, which is a mixture of gold and silver, and of great value, whether in their essence or by decree by government. So that basically gives you an idea that there was a certain weight, there was a certain sort of thing to this, and it's marking there. It's got the word back there and the word front. So the word back in numismatic terms is the reverse, and the word front is the obverse. So there we go. So we put that in there. That's a really nice collection. That's a really nice. When I was talking about social media, sort of over 120 years, these coins are circulating, sort of different weights, different sort of values, and obviously you've got the silver and you've got the gold value. And I'm probably thinking you've got electron value as well, which is a mixture of gold and silver. But that sort of gives you. So these people come into the mix, and then by the year 546, something happens. And guess who comes into the park after this emperor Croesus? It's these buggers, the Achaemenid Empire, right? So this is world of Darius the Great, Darius the First, not to get him mixed up with Darius the Third, who was defeated by the likes of Alexander the Great in the year 330 BC. So if we look at this table, right, so what we're talking about is 546 by 546. Cyrus the Great conquered the great Achaemenid world. Basically, it all started off with between. So when you think about it, just go back to one of these maps as well. You can see that look at the size of this Achaemenid Empire. It's the largest empire in history up until Rome. But one thing I would say, right, is obviously the Chinese have got big worlds as well. But what I would say, and this is something that I expressed last night, this to me is the largest, best functioning empire other than some of the Chinese ones that the planet has ever seen, right? In that it's not an empire based on massive sort of colonial conquest or massive sort of rape and pillaging its way through the world as the Romans did. This is an empire that gave people choices. This is an empire that saved kingdoms like the people of Judah, right? The Jews, right? The Achaemenids freed the Jews from the slavery of ancient Egypt. Put that into the mix. This is why history is relevant. And I've got to sort of dumb down in what I've just said there, but that Cyrus the Great freed the people of Judah from the Greeks, for example. And obviously they conquered Babylon as well by 539. So all of these little worlds are slowly fall into the Achaemenids as an example of an empire which is more of a successful, more of a cooperative empire, linked by roads, linked by trade, linked by cooperation, linked by one single language, and all of these different things. This makes this the truly great empire of history, the first Persian Empire. So when we look at that, when we look at that sort of eagle, we can squint our eyes and think, hang on a minute, that looks a bit Roman, doesn't it? You know, the Romans obviously grabbed this sort of eagle and made it their own, as the Romans did with most things. You know, they're sort of stealing different things from all these different worlds. So the Achaemenids themselves, and thinking about this world, I've got a better map I discovered sort of than this. It sort of shows it a little bit more clearly. And what we've got, so as empires go, you know, 560 odd, you know, all the way to 330 odd, you know, there's a few burning 200 plus years there, which is good. That's all right, yeah. So, and it's like a cooperative world, but in many ways, Alexander the Great took on, and also this has got the first worldwide professional army, you know. And in a way, it's sort of European looking, sort of Asian looking. This is a rather interesting people, because they took on the Carthaginians, and then the Phoenicians, who were basically sort of working with both the Achaemenids and the sort of Carthaginians. So hang on a minute, you don't want to conquer the Carthaginians; they're our mates. So the Achaemenids said, "Oh, we'll leave them be." That's as simple as that. They didn't push it. If it was Rome, they would have pushed it. So that's sort of a massive bit of a difference. So when you want to talk about it, this is if we okay, let's get back to look at that map there. If we want to think about this, and we want to look at that map, and we squint our eyes and thinking, I know Rome was bigger than these people, but this is a better empire than Rome. This is one to model your sense of empire on. Obviously, when the other week we looked at the Lycians, right? We looked at, you know, that's a way of looking at democracy and so on, and the Americans copying this in 1787. That's the Lycians, but the Achaemenids. This is how sort of empires should sort of be, and again, thinking about all this, it's sort of as we're looking at this map, I've got to give you the tick list of the Achaemenids again, sort of just to get it into our minds. So, but before we do that, we're talking about, you know, under Cyrus, sort of we're talking about Cyrus the Great, you know, 559 BC to 530. It was actually Cyrus the Second, right? But you know, there had been a Cyrus before, but this is the guy who really sticks this empire, the Achaemenid Empire, on the map. So we're talking about grabbing Egypt. So obviously, you know, who wants to deal with the Nubians, right? So just leave them and sort of going all the way down. There is something as well. There is something really interesting about this story with this empire, and I've got to check this out there, even if I miss it, folks. They had a sort of choice of conquering the Carthaginians, which would have put them directly against Rome, and therefore Rome may never have existed. Right? They didn't go against the Carthaginians. They could have wiped out the Carthaginians easy. They didn't. The Phoenicians said, "Look, you know, we're working for both sides. Don't do it." The other thing as well is they were going to take on the Egyptians, not the Egyptians, the Ethiopians, which would have basically, it would have been the biggest empire on the planet ever, right? Until the British Empire, right? If they'd have taken on the Ethiopians, they'd have gone through Sudan, they'd got Lower Egypt, Sudan, gone all the way through the Upper and Lower Nile, Blue Nile, and all the rest of it. They would have managed to get all the way through to sort of Ethiopia. They didn't conquer Ethiopia because Ethiopia had an early form of Judaism, right? And as these people freed the Jews, they didn't conquer Ethiopia because of that, probably. So again, so looking at under Darius the First. So this is like, I got to make a comparison here. This is like how the likes of the Aztec world in Central America and the likes of the Maya world in Central America, particularly Aztecs, actually grew within a short period of time. However, but sort of, you know, when we talk about a short period of time, within 80 years is massive, right? But they kept hold of this empire all the way to 330, and they only came down pants down around their ankles when they come across Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great was, I'll just tell you a little bit about this. There's two military strategists in the world, right? There's the military strategist who thinks, let's have a big army, right? Napoleon. When you look at the Russians in regards to the Crimean War, you know, big armies are going to win out. You know, Archmen, you know, big empire going to win out. The Roman Empire, right? But all of these things have one thing in common, right? If you've got a big army, eventually the big army is going to be defeated and you're buggered, right? Then you've got the other type of commander, like the Macedonian. When you think about it, right? When you think about it, I tell you where Alexander the Great came from. This was the Macedonian world, right? That's all it was. That little tiny country there, which was eventually independent of the Achaemenids, under the likes of Philip II, who was assassinated, I do believe, in 339 BC. So obviously, by the time you got Alexander the Great in 330, he's taken that little number of people, your little army, has defeated this huge Achaemenid Empire army of 100,000 plus, right? Put them not really to the sword. He basically gave them choices. You can either work with us or you're going to be put to the sword. So this is the thing. So you've got these small armies or the big army, right? And when you think about Alexander the Great taking on this small army idea was the best thing overall. So again, when we sort of look at all these facts and figures, and we'll put a few facts and figures on here. So we've got Cyrus the Great. Now, Cyrus the Great, we know where his tomb is, right? We know where Cyrus the Great is buried, right? So we've got that. But what we've got Cyrus the Great, we've got Darius the Great, you know, having this other big chunk of an empire. We got the Xerxes comes up when you talk about history. But it's interesting enough that you've got Darius the Great and you've got Darius the Third, who eventually is defeated by this little guy, Alexander the Great, with his tiny little army. It's quite ironic that. And one question I asked everybody last night, I said, you've got Cyrus the Great, you've got Darius the Great. Have you got a British leader that's called the Great, right? And somebody said, "Oh, Alfred the Great." Yeah, okay. What about another British king? No, but you have two Welsh kings that are called great. So you've got Llywelyn the Great, Llywelyn ap Iorwerth, and you've got Rhodri the Great, Rhodri Mawr. So you've got two Welsh leaders that give the title great. This is the word, the great. These are truly great leaders, and that's the whole point. So you've got that little list there, and obviously you can't call these people Iron Age. You've got to call these people historical people because they got writing. You know, cuneiform, which was sort of a national language of this sort of landscape. But even though they were sort of relatively sort of a peaceful sort of empire, well, naturally over a period of 200 years, you do have problems. You know, you have obviously conquest of Lydia doesn't count because you're conquering a land. Conquest of Babylon doesn't count. Conquest of the Indus Valley. Conquest of the Indus Valley. That's all the way over there. Do you know what I mean? It's sort of conquest of Egypt. You've got sort of you've got a few revolts. You've got the
What
sort of
about
Caribbean
Russia?
War, and you've got fall to Macedon. What the hell are you on about, Anne?
What
Russia?
about Russia? I was wondering, is it near Russia?
No, it's not. So if we
Oh.
Russia as a concept, obviously you're talking
Yeah,
about,
I know.
but Russia as a concept is so sort of mixed and so on.
Yeah.
But one thing that I would say, if we can actually go to this other more decent, there's Cyrus the Great in the city of Pasargadae, and so what we've got is that if we look at this, we sort of Sardis, that's the old capital, which is then linked to this roadway, the old capital of the Lydians. We're then talking about Sidon and Tyre. Well, Sidon and Tyre were actually they were sort of individual cities as part of the Phoenician world. The Achaemenids said, just carry on, just carry on doing your trading. We'll leave you alone. But obviously conquering the Egyptians, who conquering the Egyptians meant that they actually managed to free the people of Judah. And this is where the second temple was actually created in Jerusalem. And that's obviously the second temple, which was added to by Herod the Great. And then obviously that's the temple that was burnt down by the Romans eventually in the latter part of the 60s years, AD 60s. So then we've got the likes of Babylon. They're conquering Babylon. And you've got Persepolis. There's the tomb of Cyrus the Great in Pasargades. Persepolis is that legendary site where apparently Alexander the Great died, but there's a debate over that. But Persepolis was one of those localities that Alexander the Great burnt to the ground, and he regretted it, and he decided, right, we're not going to burn cities down to the ground. We're not going to be like sort of barbarians and so on. So what we've got is that we've got going all the way. The one thing that can be said about these people before we sort of look a little bit more about their achievements is that I don't know if any of you've ever seen one of my most favorite films ever. The film entitled, it was actually based on a book by Rudyard Kipling, The Man Who Would Be King, right? It's an absolutely brilliant film, right? I love it to bits, with Sean Connery and Michael Caine. One of the things about the Man Who Would Be King is based on the sort of the march of the Achaemenids to sort of in Afghanistan and sort of the Hindu Kush and all the rest of it, and it talks about one of the 20 cities named after Alexander the Great, after the 330s. And it sort of puts Greek culture, but it should actually put more of the likes of the organized culture that the Achaemenids were actually known for. So when we talk again about, and it's a bit of a shame that I'm only doing a little bit of these Achaemenids, but I'm supposed to be doing a lot more Rome. So just think again, this little reminder of the Achaemenid achievements, other than sort of getting the idea of the monetary system from the Lydians. So the Achaemenids are recognized as the instigators for a centralized bureaucratic administration, right? Where we base all our bureaucratic administrations on in the West today. There you go, the word West. There you go. And China. It's multicultural policy. So multicultural, we're all part of the same world. This is something that Alexander the Great copied to try and keep control of this empire for a very short period of time. And he's one of his most famous generals, Ptolemy, would eventually reign over Egypt, but that's not even in this timeline. Building complex infrastructure such as road systems. Hang on, I thought the Romans gave us road systems. No, they didn't. These people did. And listen to this. I thought the Romans gave us an organized postal system. No, it was the Achaemenids. So the use of an official language across this landscape, an official language. The Romans didn't introduce that, Latin. These people did. A civil service. Oh well, we won't say that as an achievement. It's a bit of a pain in the bum, isn't it? But they come across that. A large professional army. Implementation of agricultural reforms, and all these wonderful things, and all these things, and the idea of governance and control come from this amazing Achaemenid world. So so when we talk about let Herodotus writes about these people, just sort of look at a couple of these tables. Yeah, we've done that. So a couple of these tables, we're talking about population of about 35 million. Let's go with the bigger figure there. You know, quite a big world, you know. So obviously the Roman Empire eventually by its big thing, you know, the Roman Empire would have a population of up to about 250 million, right? Except this is 700 years before that height of the Roman world, and just roughly before about in the reign of Marcus Aurelius by about 170 odd AD. But when we think about this, is that when we go with this, all these leaders, all these names, it's great to have like a table of these. Herodotus writes about these people. You know, again, we get some of the story of these people from Herodotus, which is absolutely amazing. One person said last night, I'm not going to name. Oh, I'm not going to do the full text of Herodotus, but you can actually see it there. We've got a bit of a text. So the Persian nation, this first sort of these people, the Achaemenids, contains a number of tribes as listed here. Now you've got the Pasargadae people, which gives the city of Pasargada, where Cyrus the Great is buried, and you've got the other names there upon which all of the other tribes are dependent, right? So of all these, the Pasargadae are the most distinguished. They contain the clan, the Achaemenids, from which spring the Persed kings. Now, Persed kings is based on a Greek word, right? This sort of they called the Greeks eventually. These would be called the Persian people, the Persed. There's a link with the Greeks there with that. And then there's a point with this, which we'll come on to in a moment. So other tribes that you've got there, including the one named the Germani there, all of which are attached to the soil. The remainder, the Dropiki and the Sagaratai, and nomadic. So you've got nomadic people. So one person pointed out last night, hang on a minute, lots of these names actually sound Romanized, you know, the Germani, you know, that sounds like Romanized, you know, the Mad-Eye people, you know, the Maspi people. You think, oh, you know, this is the Romanized thing. But when Herodotus is actually writing this down, right? So they're bound to be sort of Greekanized, they're bound to be sort of Latinized, right? And there's a one point there which I actually made to sort of bring this into sort of the modern history. As somebody that was meant to be working in the Baghdad Museum in 2003, which I didn't get to do. I always remind people that the people who ruled over the likes of Syria and the likes of Iraq were from the Baathist channel type of people, right? And this could be based on the system that was originally devised by this Persian world, that if you're going to reign, you're going to come from a clan, right? But then again, if you're going to reign, you're going to come from the Windsor family. There you go. So this is where we get sort of the idea, if you're going to reign, you're going to become from a clan-like people, as that comes into the Western world, you know. So this is so when we sort of get back to this and we think, you know, these people, although they capture the world of Lydia, in many ways, when they do capture the Lydian world, they basically said to the Lydians, they say, hang on a minute, right? Let's use the Lydians as like a kingdom, right? And we'll. This is something the Romans copied, right? Yep. So when they take over the Lydian world, they gave them a sort of pseudo sort of a sense that they had some representation idea. It's a pantheon of different sort of beliefs and so on that sort of are absorbed into this Achaemenid world, multicultural world. That's a world we use a lot these days. But in many ways, instead of actually being hostile to countries that they're actually conquering, it's more along the lines that they try to bring people in before they have a bloody conquest, because they need these people in their empire. And one little thing, if anyone knows anything about Persian sort of gods and deities, Marduk is this is another thing when we talk about the likes of the conquest of Cyrus the Great, and we think about, Darius the Great, and we think about bringing everything in. The Romans are said to bring different religions into their world. Right, and when we think about the Romans bringing different religions into their world, when they come over to Britain, when you think about Sulis, Aqua Sulis, they build a sort of spring there and sort of all the rest of it, and then they sort of use that as a local deity to sort of pacify the local people, to sort of get them interested in the Roman world, and that idea comes from these people, right? Because within the pantheon of gods, that the Achaemenids adopted. They adopted one called, which was being developed by the Babylonians, called Marduk. Marduk is a damn right evil god, a cult of sin, Marduk. So if you come across Marduk, it's they absorbed the pantheon of different gods from around the world, their world, and obviously Cyrus is credited with freeing the people of Judah from their exile and with authorizing the reconstruction of much of Jerusalem, including the Second Temple. So I just want to explain that in a modern context. The reason why people are saying Donald Trump is the in the embodiment of Cyrus the Great, and people are saying this in Israel, they're saying because Donald Trump has recognized Jerusalem as the capital city of Israel, and also bringing peace to Palestine, Gaza, and the West Bank, and all the rest of it. That's the comparison, right? And obviously, Cyrus the Great was credited with freeing the people of Judah from the exile created by the Egyptian, giving them their first homeland. This is really controversial, and we want to go off that now, so you can get sort of an idea of a parallel in sort of where we're getting these sort of terminologies. And I say lots of these things from the past are repeated, so we can
It's in
talk
the
about
Bible.
exactly. Thank you, Anne. And I was talking to Mormons today, and it was really odd. They left me alone after a while. So and also there's another term, the word magi's, the idea of the idea of a magi, these sort of weird sort of figures, spiritual leaders that sort of come into sort of being mentioned, in Persian texts, sort of priests, and so this sort of comes into it. So we get these things. So in many ways, when we think about Herodotus and we think about how this world is developing, and one of the things that we've actually got, and there's a book known, there it is, the Achaemenid Persian Empire, right? And you're talking about this sort of beard, and the hair arrangements, and one of the things that we need to think about is that when we think about Attic pottery, which we're going to actually show you, if we go, I actually used it last night, and we're going to there's my turkey, right? Let's try and get on to Attic pottery, and we're talking about Attic pottery, which is ancient Greek pottery, and we think about here we go, Attic pottery. There's a link here.
Poetry. You've got poetry.
Oh, sorry. Thank you.
Pottery.
Pottery. Pottery. There we go. So this, can you remember this? You've been to Greece, right? And you brought back Attic pottery, right?
Yeah.
Now, this pottery itself is the pottery that told the story of the Greek world, right? And it also told the story of the likes of the Achaemenid world, because this pottery is becoming big by about 550 years BC. So the Greeks are out of their bloody dark age, they're coming in, and by 540 BC, they're building the Parthenon, right? And that's where all that links in. So if we type in Attic pottery, and we talk about, I think we can put in, I think there's a representation of Darius on one of these. So lots of this pottery would tell a story. uh, and God, there was one I showed, but one thing about this Attic pottery is it does tell the story of trade, because this pottery is going to be traded between ancient Greece and the Achaemenid world, and obviously you chuck in the Silk Route and you chuck in what me and Goff talked about at the beginning. So this is all really good, sort of adding these things in, adding into the sort of understanding of why we're sort of doing this and sort of the trade stuff. And yeah, we go back to, there it is. So this world itself. What we've done tonight, we've put the Achaemenids in. We've already done the Thracians. If we go back to that little bit of a map there, so by now we're really starting to understand how this world is working, why Rome occurs, why all of these things are being grabbed. Rome never ever conquers the Persian world. That is one thing that the Romans never ever do, and I think it's probably very much to do with the fact that Rome doesn't do what Alexander the Great does. Rome in many ways just wants to conquer, whereas these people had a different idea of conquer and conquest. It was so. So when we get to 330 BC and we talk about the end of this world, and we talk about the end of Darius III and what happened to him, the easiest way to conquer an empire is to walk along its roads. Yeah. And that's exactly what the Romans did. When we think about Alexander the Great, we think about him wandering around deserts and endless empty landscapes, but it's not like that at all. There's agricultural landscape, there's rich green woodland and forest. And Alexander the Great's able to get to all the former cities of the Achaemenid Empire by just marching along the roads. And guess who else did that in history? When Pizarro managed to get to the Incan world by 1532, what Pizarro did was actually to be able to get to Cusco and all those other localities, was to actually follow the very narrow roadways of the Incan world, which obviously most of these roadways in the Incan world are no longer than a meter wide, right? But what Pizarro did exactly the same as Alexander the Great. And there's also a parallel between the Incan Empire and the Achaemenid Empire, and who conquered them. So the parallel is this. So Pizarro's conquering the Incan world with a very, very small army indeed, with only a few hundred men, right? He's able to conquer the Inca world as the conquistadors under Cortez were able to bring Montezuma to his knees, the leader of the Aztec world, in the year 1521. So these were small armies. The idea was small, not the big armies of Napoleon, not the big armies of the Achaemenids, not the big armies of the Romans. There's a parallel there. And the way both Pizarro and the way that Alexander the Great was able to conquer these lands was to be able to march along the roads. And there's a city. We'll just carry along this road, right? And we'll capture another city and we'll rename it Alexandropolis. That'll be the 20th one. So again, this was a ready-made empire by Alexander the Great. What I'm doing, I'm casting aspersions over Alexander the Great's conquest of this world. But all Alexander the Great was just to replace, after a few battles, the leaders of the Achaemenids. And Alexander the Great was now the new leader of the Achaemenid Empire. So coming to an end, really, it's hopefully we've added another string to our bow. Next week we're going to be looking at China, and we're going to be just this one thing. And I know you guys are going to hate me saying what I'm just about to say, right? I'll say it in the right context. I was over the moon to be selected to work at the Baghdad Museum in 2002, right? And obviously not to be able to get there because of that illegal war and Iraq and all the rest of it. but one thing that Saddam Hussein was doing was going to be, he was very close in fully constructing the old gate of the city of Babylon, right? It wasn't completed. It was blown up and destroyed in part by American soldiers, which is a big shame. But some of the reconstruction was made, and that reconstruction goes back to the days of the Archmenids, right? Saddam Hussein was reconstructing Babylon in the image of the old Archmenid Empire. And very big chunks of that still stand today. The beautiful sort of fired fired tiles with beautiful blues, and with lapis lazuli blue and all the different colors, and you can get an idea of this from what has been reconstructed there, and this image of the great leader, and there he is, Cyrus the Great on the horse in front and with chariots either side. So again, I want to learn any more about this empire, it's great. So these carvings, this is at Persepolis, and Persepolis was a city that Alexander the Great burnt to the ground in a drunken stupor. But he decided that it was not the thing to do, right? So although we've got these surviving, and in many ways, I think the last point is in many ways, what you can see is these sort of sphinxes here, which are adapted type Egyptian type sphinxes and so on, which have been dragged into the sort of overall history and sort of folklore and sort of absorbance of the Archmenids. I think the Archmenids are not liars like Rome, right? Rome wishes to say that we've done all of this, right? The Archmenids say we've got this bit from here and we've got that bit from there. You know, we're open to being this sort of multicultural world, right? I'm not being woke in what I'm saying now. I'm just looking at the sense of complete reality in what Persepolis is and was in good old Iran. And you can see the carving there, and you can see, look at that, and you can see the beards. Everyone looked like a king, you know. And this is the thing; it was a very wealthy world, and it was a world that lasted. And I think what we've done, I'm not going to justify, you know, the Archmenids were brutal, but they were more peaceful than brutal. When you look at the Romans were more brutal than peaceful. Do you see what I've done there? And it's a shame in history that we actually do see more peaceful times with more okay worlds than are actually sort of more destructive, angry worlds. But what we do in history, we talk about ancient Rome, we talk about the Mongols, you know, we talk about, you know, destructive, angry people, instead of people that were maybe trying to do the right thing. And in some places, when you look at the Jews, in some places where you look at the Lydians and how they eventually treated the Lydians, which were far better, and the Babylonians, and obviously not burning Babylon to the ground. Isn't that a good example of conquest? And instead of burning cities down. Yes, and just this final reminder, I'm sure Bill would love to see Caligula, the uncut version, which is on Amazon Prime. And I'm sure I don't look anything like the representation of Caligula here. I really don't. So on that note, we're going to call that a day, and hopefully it's good to have you all joining us tonight. We would say a full class, and I'm glad that there was a little bit of error tonight, because we've all managed to get eventually on tonight. You know, because I was in one room and some of you were in another room, so we managed to start this off okay tonight. So we've had a good, nice 2 plus whatever hours. You know, obviously with a break there. So I would like to say, Goff, is that we'll try to get you a script soon. Nobody knows what we're on about other than Goff, and I would like to ask if anyone has got any questions. Bill.
Well, I never heard of the Archmenids. Carl, it seems to be one area of history which has been neglected, because I follow a lot of TV programs on history, you know, all different empires, but that's one area which never been covered. So it's a new it's a new part of history for me tonight. Really is, you know, the Achemenids. Well, who'd have thought it?
And I really appreciate you saying. And one thing, Bill, I want to explain what I'm doing, right? Which might just to sort of remind everybody. I was on an acting set a few weeks back, and I said, oh look, you know, somebody said, well, what do you do, and not what films you're in. Professional actors, we don't talk about the work that we've done. And so, what do you do outside acting? I said, oh, I teach this thing online, you know, the archaeology online. So the way I'm doing it is I'm looking at sort of other cultures, like making comparisons with the Etruscans and the Carthaginians and the Thracians, and we've got to do the Germanic people, and obviously we've done the Archimedes tonight. We've done all these different worlds, and to try and understand how Romans think, and not to present Rome as just being a ready-made package. Rome is not a ready-made package. It's taken from everybody, right? It's grab this, and then your mind gets to the point. So when you actually start to look at the Roman world and how it functions, you start to understand it. Without that, just thinking of Rome as this one big beast is not what I want to do. I want you to understand that. So when you start to come you know, sort of the Bactrian sort of auxiliaries, and you look at the Vespasian Roman auxiliaries, and you try to think where their experiences come from, a sort of, you know, Syrian cavalry detachments. How the hell did they end up in the Roman legion? But what is their story? So we're doing the story, and we're understanding the story, and we're then understanding that the Romans are the big cheats in history. They claim to have be the firsts on everything, and they're clearly not. I am now, Bill, one of the biggest problems is I am now really struggling to understand anything that the Romans did that was original, that they gave the world.
They might have
They
coagulated.
copied, didn't they? They copied. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Anyway, thanks for that, Bill. I really appreciate that, Bill. And I heard a little bit of your program that you were watching, and it sounded fascinating on John Aubrey and Avebury. That was absolutely great. So cool.
Yeah.
So right, Annie Panny, anything you want to say? We'll get the troublemakers out the way first.
Suppose it's just, no, it's just you know, that word that you know, you gather everything that you want, and you create a new empire. You know, this is. Yeah, I suppose that's, but like you say, they integrated into areas. They didn't really, well, they did conquer, you know, but they had battles.
Not in a Roman sense. That's my point.
Yeah, but okay, then they merged more.
Yes,
you know, and so that they were intelligent, you know.
Yes, of course.
To do what they did, you know. And but life, you know, gets difficult, doesn't it? When you
it does, and things change. Maybe the empire got a bit rotten, and they come across Alexander the Great, and that was it. But when you think about this world and how it works, you think about, well, you know, Rome would go into places, and if you put any resistance up against Rome, that was it. You were all enslaved. End of day. You don't hear this with the Archimedes. You don't hear this with most of the worlds that we've actually covered. You don't hear this idea of slavery.
It's been really interesting, and I think there's going to be a lot more people looking at it, you know, now.
Yes, and so they should. And again, it's a sort of is putting the context into history, and allowing our minds to understand, because again, back to what I said on Tuesday. I said when we go to history, when we were taught history in school, we were given a package. Henry VIII, there you go. What about Henry VIII? You don't hear about his childhood. With the Roman Empire, we don't hear how Rome did this. We might hear about Romulus and Remus, but it's just one channel, right? We don't hear about all these other things coming in, and this is what we're doing now. So
yeah.
Thank you very much.
Right.
Thank you very much for that, Anne. Right, Henri.
Henri.
Hello. Yep, I'm there. No, I agree very much with Bill's sentiments. It's not an area that I had any knowledge of at all before, and so I think it was really good. Thank you very much.
And with that, Anne mentioned Russia earlier on, and I just thought, well, Russia is as complex as any other world.
Not go down there.
Yeah, we don't want to go. So, but and when we Russia's never really been Russia until you look at the Swedish Vikings, you know, and then you've got all the Tartars and all the rest of it. So that's a really complex one. It's more complex than the Roman world, but there you go. Right, okay. Nothing else from you, Henry?
No, thank you very much.
Right, let's do Pat before she falls asleep.
Just to say, I'm with Bill as well. I'd never heard of it. It's all new to me, so it's fun to see something new I haven't heard of before. So thank you very much.
My pleasure. And we'll dig into the guts of China next week. But it's got to be sort of still Greek type of Roman coins being found over there. We've had this thing before. I want to put this sort of Chinese people that have the evidence found in London by about AD 200 and chuck that in next week. Right, Goff, and then we'll do Richard, and then we'll call it a night.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to join you. I'm going to go at the Romans again. So, but thank you for introducing us to the world of the Armenids. Very interesting. Thank you.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah.
And Richard, anything from you, darling?
No, very good. Very interesting.
Good.
Actually, there was a series on, I think I picked it up on the BBC somewhere, which virtually went through all the Persian Empire and Darius, Alexandra. I can't think what it was called. I'll have a look for it and see if I can dig it out. And it was quite a good series on the history of the world. So
well, let us know next week. Good. I would say one thing. This is a far better presentation than doing my column for the Barron District, looking at a sort of a handrail. I did an article on a handrail in the Barron District, a metal handrail. But we don't want to go there. But it was a really good, interesting article, you know. So if nobody else has got anything else to say, it's been a great having you all along tonight. It'd be great to have you next Wednesday. You watch what you're doing. Be safe, everybody. So I'm going to say good night to Goff, Richard, Anne, Bill, Henry, and Pat. 7 of us. What a great thing.
Night.
Good night to you all.
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Night, guys. Bye-bye.
Good
Bye-bye.
night. Good night.
Night, lovelies.
Good night.
Get up to my steg, Pat and Anne.
Oh, good night. God bless.
Night, guys.
Rest.
Night, babes. Oh, there is. He's still there. He's looking at the screen. Goff, you're still there. He's got his finger in his mouth. Finger? I'm sure it's good. Right, there we go. Everybody who's watched online, don't forget to like and subscribe. Really appreciate it. I couldn't do these without people's contributions. So if you want to make a contribution, if you want to join my channel, £1.99 a month, it's absolutely great. £8.99. It pays for something, which is absolutely great. Sort of not begging, but every penny helps. And watch my acting stuff as well. So lots happening. So I'm combing my pussy here, and he's really happy on my lap. We've got 2 cats all together. Bit of heating here now. I've got to leave West Wales now in a short while to get back to Barry. Oh my God, Barry. Oh no. I do have a coffee break in the middle, so I've got to make sure all the animals are in bed. Happy days. Right, so okay, folks, thank you, folks. So diolch yn fawr I chi, gwelwch chi eto, nos da chi. Nothing in chat books on that one, nothing in chat box 2, nothing in chat box 3, nothing in chat box 4, 5. Oh, hang on. Oh, anything in that chat box? Nobody writes anything in the chat anymore. Nothing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And there, last button there, and nothing there. Done. Diolch yn fawr I chi, gwelwch chi eto, nos da chi, and